Welcome my YouTube channel, ladies and gentlemen. Your absence is destroying them, man. They can't escape it. They took your presence for granted. Your energy, your loyalty, your time. They thought you'd always be there. But now, you're not. And that silence, it's deafening to them. In a world that constantly seeks validation and noise, your absence becomes a thunderclap. When you remove yourself from someone's world, and you do it with quiet discipline, not pettiness, you unleash a force more powerful than anger or confrontation. Your absence reveals your worth. They may not have noticed your kindness when it was abundant. They may not have honored your efforts when they were consistent. But now that you've walked away, they feel the collapse. The silence of a stoic man is not weakness. It is a strategic withdrawal. A man who knows himself does not chase. He does not beg. He does not explain his value repeatedly. He simply disappears. And in that disappearance, he destroys illusions. The illusion that he was weak, that he was replaceable, that his presence was insignificant. Let them taste the absence. Let them live in the vacuum created by your disciplined exit. Because now, fade. They can't escape the memory of your presence. It lingers in their thoughts, echoes in their empty moments. Every other person they encounter will be compared to your strength, your control, your stillness. And none will measure up. You didn't leave to hurt them. You left to reclaim yourself. You left to protect your peace, your energy, your self-worth. And in doing so, you became unforgettable. Understand this deeply. When you operate with stoic discipline, you don't chase, you don't over-explain, and you don't linger in unworthy situations. You walk away silently, powerfully, and they will never forget it. You are not cold. You are precise. You are not distant. You are intentional. Let them sit in the silence. Let them stew in their regrets. Let them face the mirror you left behind, because now they have no distractions. Only truth. This is the discipline of the stoic man. He gives freely. He observes clearly. And when needed, he vanishes completely. You are the storm they never saw coming. And now your absence is the silence they can't unhear. Asterisk. There is a peculiar power in absence. One that is not fully grasped until it is experienced. It is not an aggressive force, nor is it loud. It does not announce itself with words or gestures. It simply removes itself. And in that removal, a world begins to crumble, not externally, but within the minds and emotions of those who once depended upon it. This is not a punishment, nor is it vengeance. It is the natural correction of imbalance. When something once present is no longer there, consciousness must come to terms with what it lost, what it ignored, what it assumed would never leave. All things spring from consciousness, and that includes presence. When a man removes his conscious attention from a person or a relationship, he withdraws life from it. What once thrived begins to diminish. What was once animated becomes still. The outer world, though it appears solid and stable, is but a mirror of inner states. And when the inner state of detachment is assumed fully, without fear or resentment, reflection must shift accordingly. You become invisible, not because you physically vanished, but because your spiritual participation has ended. This is the kind of absence that destroys, not through violence, but through the slow erosion of attention. Where there was once warmth, there is now cold. Where there was once consistency, there is now void. And in that void, the other must face themselves. They must confront the truth they denied, that they were not the center of your world, that you were not sustained by need, but by awareness. To be absent in this way requires discipline. It is not indifference, nor is it bitterness. It is the sacred act of reclaiming energy from things that no longer reflect your inner vision. When you truly understand your own value, not as an egoic concept, but as a deep knowing There is no need to argue, no need to explain, no need to chase. You simply leave, quietly, completely, and the power of that absence ripples outward into the hearts and minds of those who once believed you would always remain. They feel it in ways they cannot articulate, not because you left a hole, but because your presence was never properly acknowledged while you were there. Your silence becomes their mirror. Your absence becomes their teacher. And though they may blame or avoid or distract themselves with substitutes, the truth lingers. What they once ignored has now become the source of their unease. You are not simply someone who showed up. You were the presence that stabilized the environment, the energy that made things feel safe, warm, alive, and now you are not. This is the hidden nature of power. It does not need validation. It does not need noise. It does not beg to be seen. It simply is. And when it is removed, its significance becomes undeniable. You do not need to convince anyone of your value. You do not need to fight to be remembered. If you ever truly dwelled in awareness, if your presence was conscious and centered, then your absence is equally profound. But how did they not see it when you were there? The answer is simple. Attachment blinds. Not just theirs, but yours as well. And herein lies the deeper revelation that attachment is not love. It is dependency. Why? It is the subtle belief that one's happiness, peace, or worth is tied to another. And this belief corrupts both parties. For the one who is attached becomes needy, fragile, reactive. And the one to whom the attachment is directed becomes either overwhelmed or indifferent. Attachment breeds weakness because it places power outside the self, creates an illusion that something or someone must behave a certain way in order for you to feel whole. It is a form of slavery masked as affection. And the moment you believe you must hold on to someone for dear life, you have already forgotten who you are. You have abandoned the divine authority within. You have placed the kingdom of heaven into the hands of another. Freedom comes the moment you withdraw that projection, not from hate, not from coldness, but from the inner realization that nothing outside of you has power over your emotional state lest you consent to it. You do not need to chase what you already are. You are already love. You are already peace. You are already complete. When you know this deeply, then no one can enslave your heart. You no longer grip. You no longer cling. You simply allow. And ironically, it is in this freedom that you become most attractive, most magnetic. For when you release the need for someone, they begin to feel it. They feel the vacuum where neediness once dwelled. They feel the solidity of your detachment. They begin to question themselves. And not because you sought revenge, but because your absence now shines a light on all the places where they failed. To meet you, it is a law of consciousness that what you stop feeding must fade. Relationships built on illusion and control, on fantasy, on dependency, cannot survive without energy. And when you stop giving energy to those illusions, they begin to dissolve. If the connection was shallow, it will vanish completely. If the connection was real, it will transform. But either way, your absence initiates the process. You do not destroy people. You destroy their illusions. You destroy their expectations. You destroy the false identity they projected onto you. And this destruction is not cruel, it's liberating. For them, what remains after the storm is the truth. And truth always sets one free. The habit of clinging must be broken, not by force, but by understanding. You were not born to beg for love. You were not born to convince anyone to choose you. You were not born to live in emotional debt. You were born to express divinity, to radiate presence, to be so aligned with the highest self that your very being becomes its own reward. And when you finally stop giving to those who do not see, something miraculous happens. You rise, not above them, but into yourself, into the stillness, into the peace, into the knowing that you are enough. Not when they call, not when they return, but now, here, always. Let them miss you. Let them wonder. Let them wrestle with their own minds. That is not your concern. You are not their savior. You are not their lesson. You are simply the mirror. And now that you've walked away, the mirror is no longer there to reflect their illusions. Let the silence speak and the absence teach. And let your soul rest in the certainty that all is well. For in your stillness lies a strength the world does not understand. And in your absence lies a presence they will never forget. Asterisk. There is a sacred dimension to silence that the world rarely honors. In the world addicted to reaction, speed, and explanation, silence is unsettling. It is not easily understood. Yet, silence is the great revealer. When words cease and presence withdraws, something begins to stir not outside, but within the other's own consciousness. The mind, once so eager to focus outward, is forced to turn inward. And in that inward turn, the truth begins to surface. People believe they want honesty, but what they truly seek is comfort. As long as your voice soothes, your presence affirms. Your energy reassures. They are spared from looking into themselves. But remove those things, and the mirror stands bare. No more distractions. No more emotional anesthesia. The self must now face itself, and there is nowhere to hide. That is the power of silence. It is not emptiness. It is a container that holds. The one thing most people avoid, their own awareness. When you withdraw your energy, not as a manipulation, but as a divine act of self-possession, you activate this mirror. The silence becomes louder than speech. The absence becomes more instructive than lectures or arguments. You are no longer supplying the story. You are no longer participating in their version of reality. And now, without your voice to override their inner dialogue, they must finally hear it. The mind begins to question. The emotions begin to swell. The projections they placed on you begin to dissolve, and in their place, only truth remains. The silence shows them where they were blind. It shows them the patterns they ignored, the behaviors they justified, the entitlement they carried. Because as long as you are available emotionally, physically, spiritually, they can avoid reflection. But when you step back into your own stillness, it creates a spiritual vacuum. And that vacuum pulls everything hidden into the light. This is not a punishment. This is initiation. In the silence, the other begins to recognize not only what you were, but what they failed to see. The jokes they dismiss, the kindness they expected, the strength they misread, as softness all of it returns to them. But now, through memory, not presence. In memory, when met with stillness, becomes sharper than experience. The heart replays what the ego once ignored. The mind fixates on what it had the luxury to overlook. And this becomes their inner fire. Not a fire of anger, but of revelation. Silence is not an absence of love. It is often the purest expression of it. For silence, force is responsibility. It asks the other to do something the world rarely demands, to take full ownership of their own inner life. Without someone else to lean on, blame, or interpret for them, they must now turn inward. And what they find there is the measure of their own truth. Your silence, therefore, becomes the teacher. It is not the loud gestures that transform people. It is not the emotional displays. It is the quiet removal of presence that shifts everything. One does not need to raise their voice when they know their absence carries more weight than their explanation. This kind of silence is power not because it dominates, but because it awakens. And yet, this silence only becomes transformational when it is joined with detachment. For if you withdraw physically but remain emotionally entangled, the mirror becomes fogged. The detachment must be clean, complete, rooted not in anger, but in a deeper truth that you no longer seek validation outside of yourself, that you no longer require another to recognize your worth in order to feel whole. This detachment is the beginning of respect. For what people take for granted, they do not respect. And what they are constantly fed, they come to expect. But when the source removes itself, appreciation is born. It is not a forced recognition, it is an organic one. Just as one does not truly appreciate air until they struggle to breathe, so too is your energy most recognized. When it is no longer given freely. To detach is to return to your rightful place as the originator of experience. It is a conscious decision to no longer allow another's perception to shape your identity. And this decision is not cold. It is divine. It signals to the universe that you remember who you are, that you will no longer live in distortion, that you have reclaimed your kingdom within. Detachment is not distance. It is clarity. It is the refusal to carry what is not yours. To stop pouring your energy into vessels that leak. To cease trying to convince anyone of your value, and instead to embody it. When you detach in this way, something begins to shift, not only in you, but in them. They feel the void, but they also begin to see the fullness you carried. They feel your absence, but they also remember your presence. And now, stripped of expectation, they are forced to confront what they never dared to feel while you were near. Respect is not born through pressure. It is born through contrast, and detachment provides the contrast. It strips the illusion that you will always be available, that you will always be forgiving, that your love is unconditional regardless of behavior. And in doing so, it introduces a new frequency, one in which love is no longer confused with sacrifice, one in which peace is no longer dependent on external response. This kind of detachment carries a vibration that cannot be ignored. It speaks louder than pleading. It teaches more than advice. It creates a field of awareness around you, and those who enter it feel the difference. They sense that you are no longer a participant in the emotional games, that your spirit has risen to a place of silent sovereignty. And in this place, only truth remains. You do not force anyone to respect you. You simply stop offering yourself. Where respect is absent, you become unavailable to anything that dishonors your soul. And that unavailability is not bitterness. There's wisdom. For you understand now that your energy is sacred. Your time is sacred. Your love is sacred. And anything sacred must be protected, not scattered. Through silence and detachment, the roles begin to reverse. You no longer seek, you attract. You no longer explain, you exemplify. You no longer chase, you choose. This is the quiet revolution of the soul, not by noise, not by anger, but by standing still, rooted in self-awareness, detached from need, yet open in presence. And it is in this state that you teach the greatest lesson, not through words, not through correction, but through being. For the world learns more from your absence than it ever did from your explanations. And in that space, something higher is born. Not just in them, but in you. Asterisk, to live consciously is to recognize that all things stem from awareness. What you accept is true. What you persist in assuming, what you entertain in imagination, these determine the structure of your outer world. When this understanding is rooted deeply within, no event is interpreted as random. Every circumstance, every relationship, every departure and arrival becomes a reflection of self-perception. The power is never in what occurs, but in how you define it. To control the narrative is not to manipulate others, it is to decide within your own consciousness what role you play and what meaning you assign. Most people drift through life reacting to appearances. They assume their identity based on how others treat them. When affection is shown, they feel worthy. When it is withheld, they collapse inwardly. In doing so, they relinquish authorship. They become a character in someone else's story, but you are not a character. You are the author. The moment you cease defining yourself based on reactions and behaviors of others, the moment you return to your origin, you no longer ask what they think of you. You declare what you are. You no longer wait for closure. You provide it. This is not a denial of reality. It's the recognition that reality is shaped by your assumptions. The person who wronged you, ignored you, or undervalued you, what power do they hold if you decide they no longer define you? When you withdraw your belief in their opinion, you break the invisible chain. Their approval loses weight. Their silence loses grip. Right? You no longer bend your identity to fit their vision. You reclaim authorship of the story. It is not about changing their mind. It is about changing the inner dialogue that once made them the authority. You revise the internal script. You do not deny the scene, you reinterpret it. And in doing so, you rewrite the emotional meaning. The one who once rejected you becomes the catalyst for your awakening. The one who overlooked you becomes the mirror in which you rediscovered yourself. This power cannot be seen outwardly. It is not loud. It is not proclaimed. It is lived, felt, assumed. You do not need to announce your shift. The shift occurs in silence. In the quiet knowing that you are no longer available for old roles. You are no longer cast as the abandoned, the betrayed, the one left behind. That chapter is closed not because someone else ended it, but because you rewrote the conclusion. Every person carries an image of themselves. Most of those images were formed in reaction to others. But the moment one pauses and reflects, the deeper truth is revealed. You are not the reflection. You are the source. You are the projector, not the screen. And the story you tell about yourself, whether whispered in thought or felt in stillness, determines the shape of your world. If you say, they left me, you embody loss. If you say, I outgrew what no longer aligned, you embody expansion. Both stories may point to the same event, yet only one leads to liberation. One imprisons, the other awakens. And that choice is yours. When you know this, the silence of others no longer haunts you. Their absence is no longer confusion, it is clarity. You see it not as rejection, but as space, a sacred pause, a blank page upon which a new narrative can be written. And in this rewriting, the most extraordinary phenomenon begins to occur. They cannot escape the void you leave, not because you haunt them, not because you try to return, but because your energy, once present in their life, was more than an interaction with spiritual substance. You were not simply a body. You were not simply attention. You were consciousness, presence, frequency. And when you remove that frequency, what remains is silence. A silence that echoes. A silence that teaches. The absence of presence is not the same as indifference. When your energy was given with sincerity, when your presence was full, giving. And consciousness removal is not empty. It is felt deeply. Because most of the world does not engage with depth. It swims on the surface. And when someone enters their life with depth calm clear, connected, it registers as grounding, stabilizing. Even if they cannot name it, they recognize it. Now that you are no longer there, they may laugh louder, speak quicker, or surround themselves with noise. But beneath the surface, something is missing. Something their new distractions cannot replicate. Because what you offered was not attention, it was rootedness. What you gave was not just time, it was the calm of spiritual awareness. And now that awareness is gone. They cannot replicate it because it was not a performance. It was your state of being. It was not charm. It was not strategy. It was stillness. Okay. And that stillness lingers even after your voice has gone quiet. Okay. Even after your presence has faded from view. Okay. The human mind, when left alone, begins to reflect. And when it reflects, it returns to what brought peace. They did not notice it while you were there. Familiarity made them blind. But now, in your absence, The mind replays the moments of warmth, the depth of conversation, the groundedness of your presence. These memories are not just nostalgia, they are invitations to awareness. Reminders of what was real. You are no longer in the room, but your energy remains, not as a ghost, not as a longing, but as a frequency they cannot forget. They feel it when they are surrounded by others, yet still feel alone. Feel it when they laugh, yet something feels shallow. They feel it when they attempt to recreate the connection, yet fall short. The void you leave is not pain, it is revelation. It shows them where they once received presence without understanding it. It reveals what they once had, but failed to see, and now they cannot unsee it. They cannot escape it, because you were never just a participant. You're reflected back to them what they could be, and now that mirror is gone, you need not hope they remember. You need not wait for recognition. That is no longer your concern. Your work is inward. Your task is authorship, to assume the state of being that no longer needs to be seen, because it sees itself. And in that assumption, the world reorganizes. The roles shift. The energy changes. They feel your absence not as rejection, but as instruction. And whether they rise or remain, whether they awaken or retreat, the void remains. A quiet whisper of what once was. It's a reminder that stillness walked beside them once, and they did not listen. Not fully. Not yet. You write this story. They live in its echo. And the more still you remain, the more profound the echo becomes. Truth rarely arrives during noise. It waits for stillness. It waits for absence. Not just the physical absence of a person, but the withdrawal of energy, the removal of expectation, the silence of presence. When all the sounds of habit and assumption go quiet, the hidden patterns come into view. In the absence of what once was, the soul sees clearly. When you are present in someone's life, when you are continually offering your attention, energy, and emotional openness, the mind of the other builds an image of you. This image is not you. It is a version filtered through their perception, their needs, their preferences. As long as you are there to fill the role, to feed the script, to say the familiar words and play the predictable part, the illusion continues. But when you remove yourself, the illusion has no more stage on which to perform. Now, in the stillness, the imagination begins to rewind. The image becomes unstable. The mind replays what it thought it knew and finds unfamiliar textures within it. Your silence becomes contrast. And in that contrast, something begins to shift. They start to question what they thought they understood. They recall the tone of your voice, the calm in your eyes, the way your presence brought an inexplicable quietness to the moment. These were details unnoticed while you were near or overlooked, not from malice, but from assumption. Absence disrupts assumption. And when assumption is disrupted, the truth can rise. The truth was always there, veiled under familiarity. It needed space to be seen. Now that you are no longer there to reinforce their version of you, they are left with only fragments. But in those fragments, they begin to recognize something much larger, something they didn't know how to name while you stood beside them. They feel it not as a memory, but as an energetic echo, a subtle pulse, a realization that you are not what they imagined. You were not only what they needed, you were not only their comfort, you were a mirror of depth, a presence of clarity. And now that you are gone, the absence reveals what was hidden beneath the surface the entire time. The world of sense deceives because it is constantly in motion. It distracts with events, reactions, and surface-level emotions. But the deeper truth of who someone was to you, of what you meant to them, of what their soul whispered in silence, ours requires the quieting of all outer things. In the quiet truth emerges, and often it is not flattering. Often, it is not what they expected to find, because in the truth, they see their avoidance. They see their disregard. They see their own blindness, and they can no longer pretend. You need not say anything. You need not return to explain what they failed to see. The silence explains more than speech ever could. For every soul must meet itself. And when you remove yourself, that meeting becomes unavoidable. But this process of truth revealed through absence is not just about them. It was about you. For absence not only teaches others who you were, it teaches you who you are without them. When your energy is no longer invested in being understood, in being received, in being appreciated, you meet yourself again in pure form. No roles, no stories, no emotional demands, just being. There is a peace that arises when you stop giving your energy to what does not nourish you. A calm that comes not from victory or revenge, but from remembering. Remembering that you are not an extension of someone's desire. You are not a background character in someone else's becoming. You are the originator of your experience. And when you cease pouring yourself into spaces that diminish you, you reclaim what was always yours. Energy flows where attention goes, and attention is sacred. Every time you focus on someone's approval, someone's reaction, someone's unpredictable affection, you are giving away the very essence of your creative power. You are no longer directing your life. You are waiting for someone else to approve of it. This strains not only the body, but the soul. It leaves you scattered, disconnected, unsure of your own worth. But when you become still, when you no longer reach outward for affirmation, when you detach from the desire to be chosen, the fragments of your energy begin to return. Slowly, quietly, they come back. You feel them in the form of breath, the form of lightness, in the form of strength that asks for nothing. You remember what it feels like to stand inside yourself again. Reclaiming your energy is not about isolation. It is about sovereignty. It is about choosing where your awareness rests. You do not withdraw to punish. You withdraw to realign. And in this realignment, everything begins to shift. The people who once took you for granted feel the shift not because you told them, but because your energy is no longer theirs to consume. The spaces that once drained, you feel foreign not because you have changed, but because you have returned to your source. And the most extraordinary thing happens when you fully inhabit yourself again. The world that once resisted you begins to reflect you. Not the wounded you, not the reaching you, but the centered, silent, unattached you. People sense the difference. They feel the boundary, though no words are spoken. They feel the calm, though no claims are made. You become a presence that teaches through frequency, not performance. And those who once overlooked you begin to remember. But their remembering is not your concern. Your task is not to be remembered. Your task is to remember the self before the reaching, before the giving that sought to be received, before the longing to be seen. In that remembering, your power returns. The world has taught many that love must be proven, that worth must be earned, that attention must be chased. But this is not truth. Truth is that your being is enough. That presence is the offering. That attention directed inward becomes radiance. And in radiance, nothing needs to be demanded. Everything flows. You no longer need to wonder if they see your value. You no longer need to chase the echo of affection. The silence speaks for you now. The absence speaks louder than all the conversations ever did. And in that space, those who are meant to awaken will feel it. Those who are meant to rise will rise, but your focus remains inward. Your flame is no longer held in another's hands. To reclaim your energy is to say yes to yourself again. To no longer abandon yourself for the sake of inclusion. To no longer dilute your soul to be understood. And in that sacred act, you become whole. Not in pieces scattered across past conversations, but in the fullness of this moment, this breath, this being, and from that being, you create again. Not to be seen, not to be praised, not to be remembered, but simply because that is what power does. It creates, it loves, it radiates, silently, effortlessly, freely.